Hey, I'm Mel.
Hey, I'm Mol.
Hey, I'm Sian.
Welcome to the TBTC.
With the GlioBabes.
2 girls.
2 brain tumours.
And 1 actress.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, let's find out.
In today's episode, we are joined by Sian Reese-Williams, actress and high-profile supporter of the Brain Tumour Charity. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Sian.
Thanks for asking me. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you today.
We are absolutely thrilled we got you on our little podcast. Of course, we've had the pleasure of meeting you through the Brain Tumour Charity and hear a bit about your work. But for those people who have no idea who you are, can you please tell them who you are?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be plenty of them. I'm Sian. I'm an actress. I have been doing that for way longer than I would like to admit. People might know me from some of my TV work. I was in Emmerdale 1,000 years ago for a while. I have played lots of police officers, I feel, for some reason. I don't know why. And yeah, I just kind of like pop up every now and again. So maybe people might recognize my face, if not my name. And that's me.
Amazing. Thank you for introducing yourself. So we do get quite deep, quite quick on this podcast. So we are just going to jump right into it as we usually do. We know you've spoken a little bit through your work with the Brain Tumour Charity about losing your brother due to a brain tumour. And here on the GlioBabes, we always want to hold space for those stories, whether they're messy, beautiful, heartbreaking, all parts of life, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's not often that you get to talk about people that you've lost unless it's with people who have also lost people. I think people get a little frightened to ask you, you know. So it's always really lovely to talk about him. I mean, we as a family talk about him, you know, all the time. Like he's kind of still there, really. He's still very much a part of our day to day. So yeah, I'm very up for talking about him because he was brilliant.
Speaking of that and say, you know, you like speaking of him, tell us what he was like. How would you describe him to someone who never got to meet him?
He was one of those people, and I know people often say this about people who have passed away, but he genuinely was one of those people that everybody liked. Like me and my sister always used to be like, everybody loves Llyr, and that means everybody hates us by default, because he was just one of those people that everybody just really loved because he was really easy to be around. He was the funniest person I've ever met in my life. I get my sense of humor. He was like my sense of humor training, basically, as a kid, you know. Like everything I find funny because of him, I think. He was the most incredible judge of character I've ever met in my life. Like if he wasn't keen on somebody, he was always 100% right, like proved right in the end. Like he was a really good boyfriend filter for me. Not that I always listened. I could certainly probably still use a bit of that now. And he was really loyal. Like if he loved you and you were wronged, watch out. And he'd always find really, really like innovative ways of getting his own back on those people. But no, he was kind of like the sort of like the level one in our family, you know, and he was brilliant, and he continues to be probably one of the best people I ever knew, and he's missed every day.
Mel, getting deep already. Sorry, no, I am a bit of a crier.
It used to be me. Season 1, I cried every episode, and since the guests, it's been Mel.
Everyone just keeps breaking me.
Challenge on. So, you know, thank you for sharing what you have. And like we've mentioned, we really want to cover as many perspectives as possible, even though we wish that none of them really existed, because when we're talking about ourselves. Yeah. And, you know, we talk about the communication we've had with our family members and people outside. We haven't massively delved into it before, but these podcasts with guests have made us realise that this is something we do need to talk about more. And your perspective is very different from our perspective and extremely valid and needs to be spoken about. What is, or multiple things, what do you wish that people understood more about brain tumours as someone watching someone you love go through that?
Well, I've been thinking about this because that was the question that I found that I didn't have an immediate kind of clear answer to. And I think the reason for that is that I didn't really know anything about them until after we lost him. Like, I didn't know anything about how it might affect somebody else that wasn't him. I didn't really know, certainly didn't know anything about the fact that there's basically no funding for it, and that it's the, you know, the biggest killer of children and people under 40. I didn't know any of this until we lost him, because I didn't really get involved with the Brain Tumour Charity until after the fact. So I can really only speak from like my perspective, really, of what I wish I knew was happening to him every day. Because I have to be completely honest, I think partly because I was the younger sibling, I was the baby, I probably ran away from it a lot. I didn't want to look at it. It was too awful. And it used to make me very angry, because he, so to give you a bit of background, I'm going to go off the subject here, but the subject of the question here, but we'd found out that he had this tumour something like 15 years before he eventually passed away. So it was a long time for him to live with this, a lot longer than kind of like the average, right? And there were physical changes in him, not big ones to begin with, but quite early on. So there were huge changes pretty much from the day that he was diagnosed. Ironically, he was about to start a course in speech therapy to become a speech therapist, and his tumour was on his speech and movement part of the brain. So he never got to do that because the changes kind of started quite early on. And I used to just kind of maybe bury my head in the sand a little bit about it. And I think the thing that I wish I'd done, and it actually, funnily enough, it was only really having met you guys that I had always felt like he didn't like talking about it, and he would kind of get on with things, and he absolutely did. He lived his life. He was a huge music fan. He would continue to go to festivals right up until like the year before he passed away, and then he like literally couldn't anymore. So he did very much kind of continue living his life. He had great mates, a good social life, all of that. And because of all of that, I just thought, oh, he doesn't really want to talk about it. But I don't know. I will never know whether that was true, because we just didn't really talk about it. And perhaps we didn't really talk about it because he wanted to protect us, or certainly me. And it was only in the last sort of 2 years that we discussed it on any level. We had one conversation about something that I will keep private because it feels like something that he felt very vulnerable about. It was one conversation, and it really floored me, because I just remember thinking, God, this is the first time that we talk about his scan results and all of that stuff, but really how it had impacted him and made him feel, it really wasn't something that we discussed, me and him anyway. And maybe for me, I wish I had been a bit more grown up about that, because I really wasn't. I really reverted into that kind of younger sister kind of role of going, la, 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 because it was a long time. It was years and years of anxiety for us as a family, but obviously, even more so for him. And I didn't do that. So for me personally, it would be asking him how he felt about it all, because I can't know that, because I'm not on that side of it, That's something that I could never have known. And I guess it's really kind of something that I never did know, maybe. So that is my answer, my long-winded answer of what I wish I had known about his personal, for want of a better word, kind of journey with it, really.
It's funny you say that though, Sean. Like, I was diagnosed around Christmas, and I didn't know anything about it either until I was diagnosed. And I think, it's such a massive thing, but we don't hear about it enough until it affects you or someone you know. I think that in itself is it shocking. You've said yourself it's the biggest cancer killer, but we just don't hear enough about it. It's not spoken enough. But I think that word cancer, even in today's day and age, is such a taboo topic to even touch on, let alone delve into. And the amount of conversations that I've had with my family and stuff over it is they're good conversations and they're deep conversations, but I feel like when me and Molly speak about it more, we tend to go a lot deeper into it.
Of course,
But I don't know that's whether just because we're, trying to see if, two people with a similar diagnosis have same things or similar things.
There's something about sorry, there's something
it's all right.
about being in a, like a, for want of a better word, any kind of like club, right? It's the same when you've lost somebody, like the grief club, like you just see it differently. Like when you hear about somebody who's lost somebody, your experience of it just changes how you speak to that person. Because you get it, even though it's a very personal thing. A lot of people get to way into life before they've lost anybody like, you know, very, very significant. They get way into life. And that is, yeah, I think I totally understand why you two would have very different conversations about that situation, because you're in that club together, aren't you, really? But yeah, we kind of, we just didn't talk about it. And maybe that was a good thing. Maybe, you know, maybe he didn't want to talk about it and just wanted to kind of like crack on. I know that he did his very best to like crack on with however he would have lived his life before. Obviously, it wouldn't have been exactly the same picture, but he did what he could, really, I suppose. And that is something that I will always really admire him for. He kind of lived, really.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. And like you say, it's such a personal thing. And there are some people that want to talk about it. There are some people that don't. And I can only imagine on the sibling side of it. So obviously I'm feeling very lucky to be here and alive when I wasn't supposed to be at this time. So my younger sister Tilly was, and still is, my main carer. That looked very different because a few years ago I couldn't have sat here and had a conversation. She was really looking after me. And actually last night before we filmed this podcast, we had a really deep conversation about this, and her perspectives and her way of, yes, I want to talk about it, or no, I don't, changes and fluctuates. And we think Gracie Nuttall's episode will be out by the time that this is. And she touched on this amazingly, in that she wants to talk about Laura. She wants everyone to know who Laura Nuttall is. And it's fantastic. And the work she's doing, fantastic. And, you know, we can see that and we can admire that. And on the other side, we will never, you know, truly understand it. But even within that, it's such a personal thing. And before, you know, we support all charities. The podcast isn't for a specific charity or organisation, but we are both young ambassadors for the Brain Tumour Charity. And before finding that group, I wouldn't say I'd had any real friends after, you know, not just my diagnosis, but I'd been ill, then I'd been okay, and then I'd been really ill again. After that second lot of illness, these guys were my first friends, you know? So as you can imagine, I was quite shocked when I was put in front of Mel for the first time. That was a tricky one. I can now understand the accent, so it's getting a bit better. It's been a bit of a struggle, but we're here. But yeah, it's being put in front of other people, like you say, in a bit of a club. And all the young ambassadors, very different stories. Unfortunately, we've lost some of our group as well, which at the beginning of this podcast we knew, but it wasn't public information. So we were kind of like holding that within us and trying to do this podcast without crying all the time.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Trying to work through that, because you find really amazing people in these clubs, but then sometimes, you know, it's a bit more open. It's right in front of you and you can't hide away from it as much, which is what you say. So it's so personal. And whether, you know, and I'm the same. At the beginning, the words brain tumour, I would have fainted. And I was literally passing out hearing those words. And now I talk about it all day, every day. And maybe in a year's time, if I'm here, it'll look different again. So as you say, it's so personal. We haven't actually spoken about how unique that experience can be.
It's interesting what you said about your sister saying that her desire to talk about it kind of fluctuates and stuff like that. I think it's been really, like, with grief of losing a sibling or anyone really, but for me, obviously that's my personal experience. It's really weird because I wouldn't say that I'm in any way in denial, right? Like, I know he's not here anymore. It was six years ago that we lost him. Like, and I know he's not around, right? But it's weird because for me personally, there can be times when I don't really think about it on a conscious level because it's just so ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous. He's my big brother. Like, I don't remember a time when he wasn't here, like, literally. So the idea that he isn't, it's not a denial, but it's like well, that's ridiculous. Because, like, you can't really fathom it, you know? So that, for me, is something that I kind of like, in a way, it's a protection, I guess, because it obviously, you know, there are days and times that you get caught off guard and days when that are worse than others. And it's certainly, you know, if I'm getting angry about the fact that I haven't got any coffee in the house and it's a little bit too much, although I've always been a bit like that, I'll know that, you know, I probably wouldn't have reacted like that 6 years ago necessarily. But in general, it's just so silly. It's just silly. You know what I mean? Kind of, that doesn't, of course he's not here, but we kind of, he's always with us as a family, really. There's still 5 of us all the time. Do you want to see a picture of him? I found one just now, like when I was getting ready. I've got a picture of him on my chest of drawers and it was on the floor, sorry. So I picked it up and it's really funny. So this is us when we were tiny and we'd made this at a robot making workshop. I am delighted. He is less so. He's, for the listeners, if you're not seeing this, he's got the most furious face on. He must be about, I don't know, like I don't know, what would he be, about 11 there maybe? So that would have made me about 7. My outfit's great. I'd wear that now. His not so much. Where's jeans? So yeah, that's with me every day. I see that every morning, unless it's on the floor.
Going through grief is massive, and it is unfortunately part of life. And you know, people, like you say, people can go through, I don't know, years in their life before they lose someone major. But you know, your brother, that is major. But was there anything that really helped you or surprised you in any way in how people showed up for you during that time, either through his diagnosis or once he'd passed?
Yeah, I mean, I've got great mates, you know, who are excellent people. And I think in the first sort of 6 months particularly, people are really great, aren't they? Like, you know, they're checking in on you, making sure you're kind of okay. And what happens then, really interestingly, because those first 6 months, and it makes complete sense, of course, in those first 6 months, you're kind of like in shock. So you're on adrenaline. Like I remember so he passed away on, I think it was a Saturday night. So I woke up on the Sunday morning. I'd actually gone up that night, and Mum and Dad woke me up early on the Sunday morning to tell me that he'd passed away in the night. And I was back in work by Tuesday because I was filming. It was great to have that, to be able to go back to work. But I remember that first day being so hyperactive and like in such a great mood. It was really weird. Like I remember thinking, this is really weird. What is going on? And then I'd been like really hyperactive and really like, yay, what a great day at work. And then I got in the car to go back to my dressing room. And I had this sharp pain in I'm going so off topic, but this is wild. And I had this really sharp pain in my neck. And by the time I'd got back from set to my trailer, I had a lump in my neck. And over the next 4 days, this side of my face was like a spoon. And this side was like normal. And basically what had happened was I'd had a saliva gland infection. Didn't know that was a thing. And it was like my body had gone, stop going to work, stop being hyperactive. The only thing we know will stop you from doing this is to screw up your face. So we're going to screw up your face so you literally can't be on camera so that you can go home and lie down, is basically what happened. But anyway, my point being about the 6-month mark. So the 6-month mark, you're kind of like, you know, adrenaline's coursing through you, kind of in shock, and you're kind of on autopilot. And then that's when it kind of hits you that you've lost somebody, really. And it is at exactly the same time that other people start to go back to normal. And completely understandably, because it hasn't happened to them, right? And it's exactly at that moment. And I remember that feeling quite lonely from some friends who I felt that I really needed. But of course, they have busy lives and shit's happening to them as well, right? Yeah. So I kind of found myself reaching out to a couple of those friends and saying exactly that. Like, it's only now that I'm really struggling and I feel like you've gone away and I need you not to. But I'm really glad that I did, because you know, it wasn't in any way trying to shame them, and I'm not trying to shame them now. Like, that makes total sense to me, you know, in logically and objectively, that of course they've gone back to their lives. You can't constantly be, and also you've got to go back to your life, you know, you've got to find a new normal. And I'm really glad that I did that, because they were like, yes, sorry. And I'm glad that I said it, because it's very easy with people who haven't lost somebody to, it's the same as like with grief itself. Like, everybody's experience of it is completely personal, and you have to be okay with that. Like, how different people deal with the loss of somebody, the same person within the family, you know, we all dealt with it very differently. And in order to kind of like be able to deal with yours, you have to be able to understand theirs, even though it's different. And it's the same thing with people who haven't had that experience of losing somebody yet. Some people can't talk about it, and some people don't know how to talk about it. Of course, it's a really difficult thing to talk about. And you have to forgive those people that, because how can they? You know, how can they know? And isn't it wonderful that they don't? Like, isn't that so great? And I mean that. It probably sounds like I'm being really sarcastic. Isn't that great that you don't know? I wasn't actually being sarcastic. I was being serious. Like, that's brilliant that they don't know. And so you have to forgive that, because it's not anyone's fault. You know, it's not anyone's fault that I am in that club and they're not. And those friendships are too important to me to get weird about that, really. But I think, you know, as much as everybody was brilliant, and, you know, at his funeral, so many of my friends turned out. Like, one of my mates came down from Bolton, slept in my bed with me that night, and was on the road again at 6 a.m. Like that, you know, that's an amazing thing to do. Loads of my friends came, you know, from all over, and I felt very supported. But yeah, that's what I always think about when I hear of a friend of mine who maybe has lost somebody. I always think that not everybody can know what that's like yet. And that's fine. And that's just life. And not to let that become like a competition, I guess. I don't know. I haven't answered your question, really, have I? Not sure I've answered.
You
Not sure I've
definitely
answered
have.
any of them.
You
But yeah,
definitely. And, you know, I'm really, the more you spoke, the more I was like, yes, keep talking about that.
right.
Because, you know, obviously I've not lost a sibling, and we've had Gracie's episode, but apart from that, it's not something we've massively touched upon and need to. But with what you were saying there about kind of like that time goes on, and not that, well, yeah, and people forget, like you say, rightfully so. And I did a bit of a LinkedIn post. I'm a LinkedIn poster. If people don't know, go add me on LinkedIn, guys.
Don't even know if I know my password. I think I've logged into it once in like 20 years. Don't even know what it is. But yes, go on.
Daily LinkedIn content. Go follow me, everyone, because I do some good ones. And I popped on TikTok as well, and I had this really angry moment, and I was like, something like, it's been this amount of months today, and it's no longer, you know, trendy, so no one remembers, and there's no place to talk about it. And I remember, after a very significant loss, I'm really lucky to have someone that supports me on not really the medical side of things, but, you know, is about, and I can go to. And we went for coffee and literally just spoke about the person the whole time. And that was all I needed, even after it had been so much time, just to be like, this person existed, and I need you to remember that. And she'd never met them. Like, she had no idea who they were, really. But I just really needed to talk about that. And then only recently have I gone, I need to talk about that a bit more in the work that I do. And I want to talk about that a bit more in the work that I do, without giving any personal details, but taking it from that outside perspective. And the amount of people, when you say something like that, then message you privately, or even comment publicly and go, yes, I get this, and then share their own stories. And they don't know who I am. I'm a complete stranger, but you would never know the outlet that that's given someone. And we get that all the time on the GlioBabes, don't we? And people sending comments from all over the world, telling us sometimes such personal information. You know, like from the first episode, I just spoke about my bowels all the time. And the amount of young people that came forward and said, this happened to me after my operation, or this happened to me, and like I've never told anyone this. And I'm like, you've no idea who I am, but you felt like you could have a space. And and I think that was the whole driving point of this podcast, to go, these things can be uncomfortable to talk about, you know, all from pooing yourself all the way to grief. We've got the full spectrum here. and, and making sure we have these discussions, no matter how uncomfortable that they are, and that we can be there, you know. So if someone in Australia, which we have had, reaches out to us and is like, this has happened to me, can I just rant for a minute? One of us can be like, yeah, we can be here to hear that and hear about these people, and make sure that that lives on, not just through you, but it, you know, as you say, like, you know, he's not here, but you're a family of 5, and that's always going to be like that.
Yeah. Sibling loss is a really interesting one, actually, because, you know, my brother wasn't married. He didn't have a partner. And rightly, you know, the immediate care goes to my mum and dad, because they've just lost a child, and that's unbearably awful that you can't really imagine it. But I read a really interesting quote a while back that said, and it, you know, it's not, yes, this is correct or anything like that, but the quote was something like, to lose a child, you lose the past. To lose a partner, you lose the future. But to lose a sibling, you lose both. Because they're not, you know, they're meant to go all the way through your life with you, right? From the beginning to the end. And I'm now older than my brother was when he passed away, which is really weird. It's actually his birthday on Saturday. And that's very odd to know that. I don't think about it all the time, but when I kind of hit a birthday, I'm kind of like, oh God, that's really weird. Like, that's weird, right? That's not how it should be. But yeah, I think there's something really true in that little quote, in that you've got all of that. You grew up together, but then you kind of do that. You don't live together. I mean, not many siblings live together into their 40s. I mean, that would be really fun, though, to be honest. And you kind of go and live your life, but they're always there with you. Like I said before, you know, he gave me my sense of humor. Like, everything I find funny is because of Llyr. Like that's just no question. The people in my life are in my life. I'm very lucky in that I have an enormous amount of very funny people in my life, and they're in my life because of, that's what I'm drawn to, really, because the first, I always call it, he was like my first best mate, do you know what I mean? And so he like set the benchmark. Are you funny? No, you cannot stay.
It's funny what you say there though, Sian, about birthdays, and you know, myself and Molly have lost someone quite recently, and their birthday came up, and I messaged Molly and I was like, oh, it's so and so's birthday, and then I realised straight away that they weren't here anymore to celebrate that, and that in itself is tough. And like you said before, you know, you go through life, and how you went to set on Tuesday and thought, oh, isn't this great? Blah, blah, blah. You kind of just, you kind of just get sucked into like the flow of life. And, you know, when people die, time doesn't stop. And I think that in itself is wild. Like people don't take, I feel people don't take enough time, but how much time is enough before you then have to, you know, hop back on the horse and so. But it was really weird, and I think that kind of hit me a bit as well when that happened. And you know, I sent it to Mol, and then I realised, and I was like, oh, like, damn. And then I was in a bit of a weird way for a while, and I just thought, that's so crazy that like we're going through that at our age. And you know, you've said yourself, we are now unfortunately in this shit club, but there's so many people that, you know, I wouldn't have met Mol if it wasn't for this shit club. And I wouldn't. No. Right, don't start this. It's like, yeah, you've lost me now. But yeah, like
you've shamed her for being nice.
I won't do that again, Mol. That's for sure. But yeah, it's stuff like that, and you know, we wouldn't be sat here having this conversation if it wasn't for our diagnosis, and you know, that I wouldn't change. But there's things along the way that obviously I would change. But yeah, it's a whole whirlwind of emotions, I guess, isn't it? And
yeah, and they come and go, and you know, they hit you at times you wouldn't expect. I remember the first Christmas after we lost him, like we were all, you know, obviously dreading it, and it was awful in some ways. I mean, Christmas Eve was worse than the day, I seem to remember, because it's like ripping the plaster off, isn't it? Like looming. It's like, you know, the anniversary and like January is the worst month anyway, but I'm watching it come. And so it's kind of, and then when the day comes, yeah, it's rubbish, but it's kind of not almost not as rubbish as waiting for that day. And so Christmas, I remember it being sad and, you know, all of the things that you would expect. But because we knew that was going to be the case, there was a protection sort of built up, like a shield. You were ready, you were kind of like facing it and ready to kind of like hit it kind of thing. And then New Year's Eve came, right? And I was going to stay with friends, and it was such a brilliant New Year's, actually. It was one of my favourites ever. It was great. And then midnight struck on New Year's Eve, and I completely broke down. And I didn't see that coming at all. Like, New Year's Eve, why? And then, well, it makes complete sense. You know, you're evaluating what's passed. It's a new year, another year, the first full year that you could say that he was not there anymore. And so now I have a shield up over New Year a little bit as well, because now I know that can be a trigger for me. I just didn't see it coming at all. It hit midnight, had a massive cry, couldn't really stop crying, and basically I went to bed. In fact, 2 New Years ago, I had a blazing row with a mate of mine, who, again, you know, we have quite a sibling relationship. It's like me and all of my friends are kind of like that. We had a blazing row this day about articulate, right?
I hate that game.
And I couldn't come. I hate that game. I get so stressed out by it. And yeah, I was being a bit of a douchebag, and we had this huge row, and I couldn't come back from it, and I went to bed before midnight, and it was awful, like, and ridiculous. But then I do think that it was probably linked to the fact that I now find New Year to be quite a sensitive, potentially difficult day. So I hope he understands that. Which I've never actually said to him, so I'll try and get him to listen to this. But yeah, you know, it's really, you just don't really know what day is going to be hard. You know the obvious ones, don't you? Like birthday, anniversary, big Christmases, and all of that kind of thing. But then there'll be like a Wednesday afternoon when you're, I don't know, making an omelette, and you're like, oh, this is rubbish.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And then there'll be another Wednesday afternoon that you feel great and fine, and, you know, and you just, it's never going to go away. It just comes and goes, and you've got to ride the waves of it, really, I think. That's what I try to do anyway. Not always successfully.
So you said about that key thing about your day-to-day life and how that can be really tricky because it's so unpredictable. And I know Mel and I, we definitely get that. And sometimes we have a morning where we do a podcast recording, we're on top of the world. Hour later, one of us is on the floor in tears, FaceTiming the other.
Of course.
You know, and that's kind of the way it goes. And sometimes even like physically feeling unwell, but usually it's like that. Oh, and sometimes these podcasts get to us because we're like, oh my gosh, we've just remembered why we're doing this.
Yeah,
I actually
of course,
have a brain tumour, forgot about that one.
I'm not just talking about this for just because I'm interested in it. Yeah,
Unfortunately
course,
not. It'd be a weird hobby, but it would be a better case scenario.
Yeah.
So obviously that's just like part of day to day. And you've mentioned that your day to day and could be a Wednesday afternoon. How do you think that losing your brothers kind of had that impact on your day to day life? I know you mentioned earlier on about what you admire about him and kind of like your standards in different relationships in your life because of that. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first 5 years had an impact that was certainly not a great one. And I'm not really talking about being sad. I think I was making choices is probably a strong word, but I would maybe be faced with something that would have 2 options of how to deal with, and I would almost always pick the wrong one, right? For quite a long time. And he passed away in the January before COVID. No, it wasn't. Sorry, that's not quite right. It was like a year before COVID. So that happened. Then there was a pandemic, and I was stuck in my house on my own, while still, you know, in a really fresh phase of kind of grieving. And yeah, I probably went a bit nuts for a while, like a good while, really. So I'd say that, you know, I had some therapy. I did a lot of work on my mental health, which is, of course, you know, always ongoing for anyone who's started working on it. You kind of realize that it's ongoing, you know, and that's a great thing. And then in the last sort of year or so, I've sort of felt a shift in all of that, in that almost like going through those, I'm kind of like thinking out loud here, but going through those create your own adventure bad choices, all of the wrong ones, has made me now figure out how to pick the right ones. Because something's sort of shifted for whatever reason, probably because I've done lots of work and a bit of time has passed and all of that. And I think he did not suffer fools, my brother, right? If you were a douchebag, he would find a way in a really brilliantly indirect way to let you know that. I don't have that indirectness. I am direct. But I'm far more likely now to go, you know what? No, no, to anyone who needs to hear that word for whatever reason. And maybe that's because a life is too short kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know. And maybe it's just kind of like carrying on his kind of like energy. That's a good thing. I mean, it's, you know, you get a bit of eye roll from people because you're a female over 40 going, no, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't care. I also just went to Thailand on my own for 2.5 weeks. That maybe I wouldn't have done that. I think I probably would have, because I like holidays and nobody could go with me at the time, so I went on my own. But I think being there and going, this is amazing that I get to do this. Maybe I wouldn't have necessarily felt that so keenly all the time, because all day, every day, I was like, I can't believe I'm here. This is amazing. Maybe I wouldn't have felt that quite so keenly. So maybe it just kind of like turns your emotions up a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Whatever they are, good and bad. I've always been somebody that feels things quite strongly, negatively and positively. And maybe in a way I've actually balanced out a little bit in that way. But the important negatives and the important positives are keener. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever. But yeah, I think when you lose somebody who's, you know, he was 41, that's too young. And getting older is an absolute privilege, isn't it, at the end of the day? Like, you know, I did my back in last week. That's rubbish. Probably wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, but at least I've got back to doing. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to kind of like, you know, there are days and times where, certainly in that first 5 years, where I didn't really want to go anywhere and leave the house, and nothing really made me feel particularly great about anything. And that, you know, you have those days even if you haven't lost somebody. But I try now to make sure that when I feel like that, I at least go to the shop. Like, even if I'm just going to buy milk, I'll, instead of saying I'll do it tomorrow, I'm not going anywhere, I'll go and do that. Really.
Just want to touch on something you said there, Sian, when you said no. And I know Molly's going to be like, oh, I'm so glad you picked that up. But we say it all the time on this podcast.
Yeah.
No is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And no, it's shit, full stop. Like, no, like, just no.
Yeah. I also definitely say yes to things more often as well, though, you know. Like, not as in like in a people-pleasy kind of way, but in a kind of, yeah, sure, why not kind of way. Like, what difference is it going to make to my day if I say yes to that? Or actually, what good difference will it make to my day if I say yes to that? But if there is misbehaviour and injustice, you're getting a no from me. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I do try and, like, if I don't really don't want to do something, I'm not going to do it. And I've always been like that. But I do also try and say yes to things maybe that before I might have gone, oh, I don't really fancy doing that, or oh, I'm a bit too tired to do that. I'll try and talk myself into doing it. Not always. Sometimes you do just need to stay at home and watch Married at First Sight Australia. And that's fine. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, but I mean, saying no is great, isn't it? It feels so nice. No, not doing that. Don't want to. Thank you. You've been rude to me, and no to you. That's always fun. That's a good one too.
So I'm going to go a bit deep again now, Sean. Now we've had a little giggle, but if there was one thing that you could keep and bottle about your brother forever, what would it be?
My instinct would be to say his sense of humour, but I've kind of already got that. So if it was something, he always made you feel like he was on your team. Do you know what I mean? Like, not in a kind of like big brother going to beat up ex-boyfriends kind of way at all. He wasn't like that at all. He was this really wonderful, placid level human being, but he always would be quietly in your corner. And I definitely really miss that. I have lots of great people in my corner, but he had this way of just kind of like overseeing it, like checking in, making sure that like that's working out and that you're okay kind of thing, really. And maybe it would be that. But yeah, I the sense of humor is very much alive in our household all the time because of him, and in everything that I do, like really silly, stupid sense of humor that has carried me through literally every single friendship I have. So I'd say those two, if I could bottle two things, it would be those: that he was unbelievably hilarious, and that he was as much as he would wind, I mean, he never stopped winding me up. He wound me up to the very last day. It was his favourite thing to do, was wind his little sister up. But he also absolutely had my back at all moments of, and every single walk of life. And he was like incredibly proud of me without ever saying it.
I feel like that's definitely a big brother thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And then, and I'm immensely proud of him. Like, the way that he conducted those 15 years of his life was remarkable, really. But yeah, the fact that he was like always on your team, and how ridiculous he was in all the best possible ways.
So you've said that about sense of humour.
Yeah.
What do you think? You think of this podcast? Would he be taking the piss out of us, or would this be a good thing?
Oh no, he would never take the piss out of good things. But he used to, so very often, so this is very classic, right? So very often I used to have tonsillitis quite a lot as a kid, okay? And he was so not as a kid, as a teenager, I started getting it quite late, but really severe, like from the age of like 14. So he would have been like 18. He was still at home, but not at school anymore. And so mum would be at work, and dad would obviously be at work as well, and he would be in charge of like looking after me if I was off school. And it was like, really, like, when you have tonsillitis is not just a sore throat, right? It's way worse than that. And I would be, lying on the sofa for a few days, and your voice goes kind of weird. And he was brilliant. Like, he would bring me toast, he would bring me tea, we'd watch films, it was great. And then on the day that he would feel like I was just starting to get better, there was one particular time, and I was able to like get up and go to the toilet and stuff. I went to the kitchen to get some, and I came back in, and he was under the duvet on the sofa doing an impression of my tonsillitis voice. He was lying there going, "Could you please go and get me some coffee?" And I was like, wait, you've just spent the last 3 days looking after me, and yet you've been holding that in for waiting for your opportunity where, okay, it's appropriate for me to now take the piss, so I'm absolutely grabbing that opportunity the second that I can. And that was just how he always was with me. So what I would say is that in the appropriate moments, he would not take the piss out of anybody, no. But he would have definitely loved it when my face exploded into a spoon 3 days after he passed away. And I remember saying, I was like, he would be finding this so funny because it was awful. So yeah, he knew how to pick his moments. He would never take the mickey out of anybody doing anything this wonderful. Don't worry about that. Unless it was me. If it was me, fair game.
Sian Reese-Williams, thank you so much for coming on this
guys.
podcast.
It's been lovely to see your lovely faces.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So in this episode, we've heard from Sian Reese-Williams talking about her brother, the charity, and everything else in between. So thank you so much for coming on, Sian, and being so open with that part of your life that, you know, we don't necessarily talk about on a day-to-day. So thank you for sharing that in our space. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure for having you on. So yeah, thank you very much.
Likewise, thank you.
You can catch all episodes of the GlioBabes over on Spotify, and on YouTube we have all of our guest episodes. So if you're listening on Spotify and you want to see our beautiful faces, please go over to YouTube. But if you want to watch it again but you don't want to see our faces, then go over to Spotify. We've given you 2 options. We're feeling kind today. Please also check out the GlioBabes on Instagram at the GlioBabes and TikTok at the.GlioBabes. And we will also have linked in the show notes, the comments, anywhere and everywhere we can, all of our support lines that we usually put into the Brain Tumour Charity, Samaritans and many mental health charities. We will also ensure that we have sibling loss support lines and contacts available on this episode.
I'm just a bit like, right, let's go. Let's do this. Let's film in. Gotta go, bye. Well, Sian, do you have any ideas?
Oh God, I don't know. I
episode?
can never end anything. That's part of my problem in life.
I think we just
Even when I want to. Even when I want to, I'm like, oh, you got there first. I'm really annoyed.